everyone, my name is Swanee, and today we have a second Helldivers 2 video because there was a patch that went out earlier today. If you haven't seen it yet, check out my previous video and I go over all of the patch notes. But in the latest patch notes, there was a number of different balancing changes that came to some of the different primary weapons and to some of the support weapons. And I've already seen quite a bit of backlash on Reddit and in the Discord. People just aren't very happy. In any video game, anytime developers nerf a fan favorite weapon, there's always backlash. That's just how it goes. But the developers of Helldivers 2 decided to put out a blog post going over some of the changes that they made and sort of giving a bit of a behind the scenes as to like their thought process and why they're making these changes. So I'm going to be going over that in this video and giving you guys my thoughts. So jumping right into it, it says balancing the firepower in Helldivers 2. We recently had a patch containing our first round of balance changes to Helldivers 2, and our head of product testing has some valuable insight into our philosophies and practices when it comes to balancing. So we have Patrick Lasota here, who is the head of product testing at Arrowhead, and here he wants to go over some of the changes that were made in this patch and why. He says, first I'd like to speak to the general power of primary weapons. Many have commented that they aren't powerful enough and are unable to deal with all the enemies either by the amount of ammunition required or the raw DPS. This is very much intentional. You need to rely on your stratagems and the stratagems of your team to deal with the enemies effectively, either by eagle airstrikes, orbitals, support weapons, or turrets. Some of your loadout / team should be tailoring their loadouts to killing the weaker stuff more efficiently. This doesn't mean that your primary weapon shouldn't feel good to use, but please understand that it is primary only in the sense that it's something you always spawn with. So I get what they're saying here. I mean, it makes sense. They don't want the primary weapon to be just extremely overpowered to the point where you don't need to call in stratagems. The whole purpose of this game is to work with your team and to choose your loadouts accordingly. They want you to plan and prepare for each mission depending on what the mission modifiers are or the planet you're on. They don't want you to just drop in with your primary weapon and annihilate everything. So this makes sense to me, and I kind of agree with them here. So next up is Nerfs and Fantasy. I have since the game release seen so many who say don't nerf but only buff, and other similar ideas. However, as a designer, I can tell you this is not a great idea, but I understand where the sentiment comes from. All too often in the games industry, the core fantasy and what makes a weapon feel good and fun is ignored for the sake of balance. I believe players are scared of nerfs because it will ruin the fantasy of the weapon and ruin their fun. It is extra important to us to tread carefully so that we don't ruin fantasy and fun when we do nerfs. We hope you, our players, will tell us when we cross that line inadvertently. Let's take a closer look at the changes we made for this balance patch. So here he's talking about the Breaker shotgun. The Breaker was quickly pinned down as the meta weapon, vastly overperforming other weapons and being the quote-unquote best choice for all Helldivers, at least if YouTube is to be believed. Helldivers veterans will remember the Breaker from the first game and how powerful it was, something we have made an effort to mimic in this game as well. We looked at the Breaker and the data we have on its usage, and it painted a picture of a well-liked weapon that was great at killing chaff and generally had few more kills than other weapons. It was, however, not necessarily better at making you succeed in a mission, and no real damage nerfs were warranted. The calculated total damage per magazine was quite high compared to other weapons, however, and something that could be reined in, while reinforcing the intended fantasy. The fantasy of the Breaker is a powerful automatic shotgun that bucks wildly as you hose down targets in front of you. It should be deadly up close with high DPS. Its major drawback should be ammunition management and pacing your fire so as not to overshoot your target. To that end, we have lowered the amount of shells in each magazine and increased the recoil. So this is definitely going to be pretty controversial. I know a lot of people love the Breaker shotgun, and obviously it got a bit of a nerf today, but honestly I kind of agree with him here as well. A shotgun should be extremely powerful up close and personal, but before today's update, the Breaker was just all around one of the best weapons in the game at medium to close range, and the fact that it was really good at medium range made it so that like the assault rifles and stuff were kind of obsolete. So I'm kind of glad that the Breaker shotgun's getting a bit of a nerf here. So next up, we're moving on to the SG8 Punisher shotgun. He says the Punisher is a powerful pump shotgun that should hit hard, but be limited by its slow reload and fire rate. Its rounds reload allows you to have it constantly topped off and makes the ammunition efficiency fantastic. Unfortunately, the Punisher had a bug with only half ammo being picked up each time you picked up ammunition, making its supposed great ammunition economy quite poor instead. It also had a weak impact when firing on enemies, often requiring multiple shots even at shorter range. To bring it more in line with its intended fantasy, we increased the damage per shotgun pellet, the stagger amount, and the total amount of ammunition you carry. We hope this will make it feel more punchy, as even if you don't kill a hunter with the first shot, you will most likely stagger it, giving you more time for a follow-up. So they're buffing the Punisher, which I think is really cool because I already like to use the Punisher anyway, and now they're making it even better. So now we have the SG22 5SP Breaker Spray and Pray. So this was the shotgun that didn't receive much love in the community. A lot of people were memeing on this weapon because of just how bad it was, and it received a bit of a buff in the latest update. They go on to say that the Breaker SMP was intended to be an even wilder, more point and destroy version of the regular Breaker, something where pacing yourself would be even harder, a shotgun that requires you to get closer, but in comparison have a higher damage potential once up close. As many players commented, however, it was mostly good for tickling anything larger than a scavenger. To bring it closer to the fantasy, we increased its armor penetration, increased its fire rate from 300 RPM to 330 RPM, and increased the amount of shotgun pellets in each shot from 12 to 16. To compensate for this additional firepower, we reined in the magazine capacity from 32 to 26, as to not make it outshine the regular Breaker too much in the ammunition economy department. So they're giving it a bit of a buff, but then they're nerfing the amount of ammo that it holds. Then next up, he talks about the Railgun, which is another pretty controversial change that's going on right now in the community. I've seen a lot of people unhappy about the Railgun change. He says another one of the current meta weapons enforced by its convenience and efficiency, the Railgun is really intended to be high-powered anti-tank sniper rifle, requiring both timing with the unsafe fire mode and accuracy with it where you hit the enemy. It was vastly overperforming in how safe it was to use and how convenient it was, not requiring a backpack or assistance to be effective, and not requiring risks to take out even larger armored targets. To that end, we changed it so that the safe mode is capable of penetrating medium armor such as automaton scout walkers, but not more heavily armored enemies like the Chargers and the Bile Titans. For those targets, you now must run it in unsafe mode and overcharge it. In addition, we reined in the Railgun's ability to damage massive body parts, meaning to get any real efficiency out of it, you must score hits on heads and other weak points. We are aware it rose to prominence as part of other anti-tank weapons, not being as convenient or efficient in comparison. We are monitoring the situation closely and will adjust more based on how this change plays out. So technically the Railgun is getting a nerf, but if you use the Railgun like I do, which is always in unsafe mode, it doesn't seem like it's going to be too much of a change. Like, yes, they're nerfing it, but it sounds like if you use the unsafe mode, you know, it's still going to do damage to the Chargers and the Bile Titans, and it's still going to hit hard, it's just not going to hit as hard in the unsafe mode. So next up is the Flamethrower, which got a pretty massive buff in this update. The Flamethrower is really the embodiment of stepping into the Queen's lair and torching all her eggs, as done by a badass action heroine. It should be powerful up close and an inconvenience to enemies that are lit on fire or want to walk through the fire and flames. As many have commented, the Flamer has felt a little too anemic, not outputting damage at a rate that is warranted by a weapon with shorter range and large volatility, such as the Flamethrower. We have increased the Flamethrower direct damage to be able to barbecue enemies that get close much faster. Please enjoy your turreted barbecue device responsibly, as this also makes it more volatile for any Helldivers caught in the stream. So you definitely have to be careful with, catching your teammates on fire. And then next up is the laser cannon. Our original intent was that the laser cannon has the role of a machine gun, but with the theoretically infinite ammunition. However, many players were somewhat disappointed by this role, expecting more armor penetration from the large drilling beam that it looks like, especially when looking at the orbital laser that can drill down and kill even the heaviest targets given enough time. Here we've decided to side with the community and shift the laser cannon more towards the players' expectations and their fantasy. The laser cannon has gained additional damage versus massive body parts, increased increased armor penetration to make it capable of dealing with medium armor, and better ergonomics to make it easier to stay on target. As this is quite a major change from the original intention of the weapon, please be prepared that it might change again in the future if these changes don't work out well. For now, let us know how it feels. So I'm actually glad that they sided with the community here. I know I was personally avoiding the laser. I tried it out a couple times and it just felt underpowered. It doesn't feel like a big, beefy, powerful laser cannon. So they actually listened to the community here and they made it a big, powerful laser beam, and I can't wait to test it out. It actually sounds like it's a lot of fun now, and I'm glad that they made this change. So next up is the changes to the shield backpack. The shield backpack is safety at the expense of a backpack slot. Unfortunately, the safety offered up by the shield backpack was a bit too great, essentially allowing you to ignore many mechanics that contribute to the fun of Helldivers, such as knockback, shockwaves, and giant explosions, obliterating you and your friends. To that end, we have increased the time the shield needs before it starts regenerating, if not broken quite significantly. This essentially means that you can't hide behind a rock for 5 seconds to get your shield back to full. Instead, it will be a degrading health bar until it breaks, and when the shield breaks, it will take longer to regenerate than before, but significantly shorter than if it's not broken. To compensate for these extra times, the regen speed of the shield itself is near instant to max HP. This is the only partial solve in our minds for the shield backpack, but it should bring it out from the must-have meta slot it has filled currently. So it sounds like too many people were using the personal shield, and the fact that it stopped you from getting knocked back and knocked over by shockwaves and stuff, I kind of agree with them here. Some of the fun of Helldivers is just getting blown up and ragdolled and thrown around and, you know, blown up by your friends, and the personal shield did kind of take some of that away. So it sucks that the shield's getting nerfed, but I kind of understand why. Then we have both the 120 and 380 millimeter barrages. The fantasy of these is an artillery storm, denying entry to the area in which they are active and raining down powerful shells on the target for a longer duration. They are primarily different from the Eagle stratagems in that while the Eagle strikes are fast to arrive and have pinpoint accuracy, these have a longer active time but are less accurate. They have, however, not delivered on the feel of being active much longer or the saturated area denial effect. To bring them closer to the fantasy, we have decreased their scatter area and given them an extra salvo. They should still solve a different problem than the Eagles, but have more value now. And then they said, in closing, I hope this gives you a greater insight to how we are thinking around balance and why we make the changes we have. Happy Helldiving. So my thoughts on this whole thing is, you know, honestly, I kind of agree with pretty much every point they made. When it comes to the games that I cover, and I cover, you know, live service games, and they do a lot of balancing updates and stuff, or like in my free time when I play Destiny 2 or something, any game where they have buffs and nerfs and balancing changes, most of the time I don't agree with the developers, and I don't like when they nerf weapons and stuff. But every point that they made in this blog post, I kind of agree with, and I understand why they're making these changes. You know, they don't want the breaker shotgun to be the best weapon in the game. They don't want shields to take away some of the fun. They want the laser beam to feel like a giant laser beam now. I think all these changes make sense, and I think they're going to make the game interesting, and it's going to be fun to switch things up and use different weapons and use different stratagems for different strategies now. They don't want the same 3 stratagems to be picked for every single mission, and then no one uses the other stratagems. So if they buff and nerf some of them and make them more equal, then you're going to get some variety. So I'm definitely glad that the developers gave this blog post and they gave an explanation as to why they're making these changes, and I hope they keep this level of transparency going forward. I love when developers are open with the community and they give a behind the scenes. The devs seem to be really open in this community, and they obviously listen to feedback. A lot of these changes came from just, you know, you go to Reddit for like 10 minutes and you can find out what the meta is. So obviously these guys hang out in the Reddit, they hang out in the Discord, they hang out on Twitter, and they take all of the feedback, and I think they made good changes. So that is going to do it for everything in this video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. If you guys want to see the entirety of the patch notes, then be sure to check out the video I made earlier today where I go over the entirety of the patch notes. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. That way you don't miss out on any future Helldivers 2 videos. And that is going to do it for me, guys, and I will talk to you all next time.